Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Today we will go over the last section in Unit 2 from Algebra 1. And today we will look at inequalities. So today we will look at the rules on how to solve and graph inequalities. This is myself. My name is Miriam. I'm your math instructor here at Penn. I am certified to teach high school mathematics at the state of Pennsylvania, and also I have earned my master's degree in education this year. This webinar, we're going to go over the most challenging topic in that last section of Unit 2. The Selfcheck questions that you will see throughout the webinar are not graded. Those questions are for your self-assessment. So please participate just to see where you are from each topic and if you need any help with those topics. So that would be a tool for you that you can use to better yourself and see where the areas that you need help with. Also, questions are the questions are welcome, and please keep them relevant to what we speak about within this webinar. You are able to type in your questions in the questions box if you have a question. All registrants for this webinar are able to receive a recording of this webinar. Whether you attend or were not able to attend, you will still receive the recording to watch as many times as you wish. The objectives of this webinar would be going over inequalities, understanding the rules that we need to learn to solve and graph inequalities, and also we're going to look at a couple of examples on real life problems on how to use inequalities to solve those problems. So the first thing I thought to go over is the really basics of inequalities, the signs that we use for inequalities. If you remember throughout webinar 1 and 2 for this unit, we have been using the equal sign. So the equal sign was the sign that we have been using so far. And the reason for that is that because so far in the unit, we have been dealing with equations. But what if we have inequalities? What are the signs that we use for inequalities, and how would we read them, and how would we decide which sign goes with which statement to make it true? So I thought to bring in that basic slide. It looks like an elementary school lesson, but it is important to remember how to use the signs. So 10 is what to 3? We know that 10 is greater than 3. Which sign should I use? The sign would be this sign, the greater than sign. Now let's do the second one and then compare them and see when do we use the sign that opens up towards the left and when to use the other sign, the opposite sign that opens up towards the right. So -5 and 4, and of course -5 is less than 4. Now, how do you decide which sign you put in the middle to make this statement true? The rule of thumb is the sign opens up towards the greater value, and that's why we have this sign open up towards the 10, because 10 is greater than 3. The same thing with the second one. This sign opens up towards the greater value, which is 4. Now, how would we read the signs? So we read the statements, the inequality statements, from left to right. So we will read it as 10 is greater than 3. And the second one, -5 is less than 4. Now, with the other two that we have left here on the screen, let's say we are saying that x, which is an unknown value, let's assume it is greater than or equal to 7. What does that mean? It means that x can be any value, such that x can be 7, can be any value greater than 7, like 7.5, like 7.2, like 8, like 10, like 100. But x cannot be 1, for example. X has to be greater than or equal to 7. These are the allowed value of x. For the y, let's say that y, this unknown value, is less than or equal to -1. What does it mean? It means that we do not have one value for y. It's a range of values. So that value can start from -1 and going down the number line. So another possible value would be a -1.5, for example, or a -10, or a -20. All of these values are less than -1. Also, y can be -1 because we have the or equal sign here. This is just an overview on how to use the signs. From speaking to many students over the phone, one of the maybe problems is that they did not know which sign to use. So I thought just to get done with that and make it clear on which signs to use and when. Now, let's look at graphing inequalities. Now, when you go forward to Unit 3, you will learn how to graph inequalities on a coordinate plane where you have an x and y axis. But in this unit, we will learn how to graph inequalities using the number line. So graphing is easy using number line. What we basically do is we look at the inequality that we're trying to graph. And the inequality reads x is less than 1. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to decide which value I'm going to circle. And the 1 is the value I'm going to circle on the number line. Let's find the 1 and circle the 1. This is step 1. Step 2, am I gonna close that circle, shade in that circle, or just leave it open like that, empty like that? What tells me if I have to shade it in or no is the sign, the inequality sign. Since it's a less than, not less than or equal, I have to leave my circle empty like that, open, just a circle, not shaded in. Now I need to decide which area of the number line I have to shade. Am I going to shade the left area or the right area? It depends on the values of x. This inequality says that x can be any value less than 1. Where are the values that are less than 1? Are they to the left of the 1 or to the right of the 1? Obviously 2 is greater than 1. So those values are not the values I'm looking for. We're looking for all of the values less than 1. So I will shade this part of the number line. And that will tells you that we will not include the 1 because 1 is not a valid value for x. X has to be less than 1. So 0.95, for example, would be an option, but 1 itself is not an option. That's why we have a circle that's not shaded in. And also any value less than 1 would be among the accepted or the right values of x. Let's do the second example. So in the beginning, it may be slow, but when we go over many examples, it's going to be just as if you have a second nature. You look at the inequality, decide is it a closed circle, open circle, which side to shade on the number line. Y is less than or equal to 4. So the or equal in my mind is going to make me shade in the circle. Which circle? The circle that will be around the 4. So I'm going to draw a circle, shade it in because we have the or equal option. Now, the values of the y will be less than or equal to 4. So which side of the number line? The ones that are less than 4. So that graph tells me that 4 would be an accepted value, and also each value that is less than 4 is also an accepted value of y. Let's do z and u. Z is more than -7. So right away, I'm going to find -7. I'm going to make a circle that's not a or equals, then leave the circle open, and then shade in the values that's more than -7. So more than -7, then it will be the right area of the number line, and that's the graph. Last one, u is greater than or equal to -3, find -3, make a circle, shaded N because we have the or equal option, and U would be greater than or equal to -3, so the right area would be the one that we shade on the number line. Any questions? Anything that was not clear on this slide? For those of you who have just joined us to the webinar, if you have a question, you can only type your questions in the questions box. The raise your hand feature does not work in our webinars. Okay, Gabrielle, you have a question. Go ahead and type in your question so I can share that with you and also with everyone else and try my best to answer your question. Okay, let's go to the next slide then until Gabrielle, okay? Okay, so Gabrielle is asking what the negative integers or the negative values represent on the number line. Negative values are values that are under 0, less than 0. For example, in the winter. In the winter, you have negative temperatures. They are under the 0 or the freezing point of the water, for example. So they are negative values. Also, if you lose money, we can represent that by using negative values. So if you have $100 and you actually lost $150, so we can represent your loss as a negative $50, just to indicate that you have lost not only the 100, but also you have lost more than the 100, which is the negative $50. Did I answer your question? So it's type of integers or numbers that we use to say that those numbers are less than 0. Okay, great. So let's move on to the next slide. And the next slide is a self-check. As I mentioned before in the beginning of the webinar, those self-checks are not graded. These are part of my webinar just to give you the chance to assess yourself and see if you need help in that topic or you are okay. So what's going to happen in these questions is I'm going to have those questions here on my slides. I'm going to leave it for a while, and then my screen will change to another screen that will give you the same question, maybe except for the graph is not going to be there, but those options will appear on the second screen and you're able to click on the right answer that you think is correct, and that way I'm able to see if I have did a good job explaining that topic, or maybe I have to do more examples, or if you had questions and so on. So here's the question. The correct inequality for the following graph is, so this time you are given a graph, but you have to relate the right inequality with that graph. Which inequality represents this graph? So I'm gonna be quiet for 1 minute, give you the chance to evaluate the question, and then I'm gonna change my screen to that other screen so you're able to input your answers. Okay, I'm going to change my screen now to the same question, and this time you're able to select your answers. And here you go. Okay, so for those questions, I will share my final answer. Whenever you get the recording and you're not sure why did we have the this answer as the final answer, you're able to pause the video and inspect the question one more time and look at the answers and see why did we choose C to be the right answer for that question. Let's say you did not know why C is the right answer, so you can either email the instructor, call, or I'm gonna give you another two options that you're able to communicate with the instructors other than phones and emails at the end of the webinar. So C is the right answer for that. Okay, solve and graph the following inequalities. So now we're not only graphing, we have to first solve the inequality and then graph the solution. So we usually graph the simplest form of the inequality. We do not just go ahead and graph this inequality as is. We have to solve the inequality and find out the set of values of x. And if you remember from going over the first and second webinars for this unit, we have gone through the rules of solving equations. And I want to remind you about these, that we had to undo the operation. So we isolate the variable by itself on one side and everything should appear on the other side. And if we are able to reach that step, then that would be our answer. The same exact rules will apply to inequalities. So there is nothing new for addition or subtraction that we have to learn. It's the same process. So we have 15 plus x is less than 25. I'm trying to solve. So I'm trying to isolate the x by itself on one side. Now this x is added to 15. 15 has a positive sign. So it means that 15 is added to the x, then do the reverse. Subtract 15 from both sides. And those 15s will just go, it's a 0. X will be on itself by itself on one side. The inequality sign will just go down as is. And then subtract 25 minus 15 will give you 10. So this is the solution for the inequalities. The set of values of x would be any value that is less than 10. How would I graph that? Well, I'm going to do the same thing. Circle the 10, do not shade in the 10 because we don't have the or equal sign option, and it says that x will be less than 10, so the left side of the number line is where we're going to shade, and that would represent the set of solutions of x. Remember that with inequalities as opposed to equations, inequalities have a set of solutions for x. For equations, we had x equals to a definite answer. For example, x equals to 3. The only value for x back then was 3. For the inequalities, we have a set of values. Let's do 2. With 2, I see some decimals. When I see anything unusual in my question, like fractions or decimals, I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to get overwhelmed because the numbers look different. They have a negative sign and decimals. I'm going to apply the same exact rules. Z is the variable. Isolate the variable by adding 3.15 to both sides. And be careful, some students will subtract. They will think that that positive or plus sign will make them add subtract 3.15. But we look actually at the sign of the number that is on the same side as the variable. This sign is negative, then reverse that by adding 3.15 and do the same thing with the other side to keep the inequality true. And plus 3.15. Do the math, that will cancel out. Z by itself greater than the same inequality sign, and then add 1.35 plus 3.15. If you want to do that by hand manually, you're able to. If you want to use your calculator, go ahead. We're not learning how to add decimals. We're learning how to solve inequalities. So don't feel guilty if you want to use your calculator, and it's going to be 4.5 on the other side. Then this solution translates to Z should be any value greater than 4.5. How can I graph that on the number line? Well, the number line gives me whole numbers. My answers here have a decimal. So what I'm going to do is find the 4, and I'm going to go over half a unit, and that would be the 4.5. This is 4.5. Is it circled or shaded? And it's a circle, just an empty circle, because we don't have the or equal sign. And then z should be greater than. So the right-hand side of the number line is the set of values for this inequality. Any questions? Anything that was not clear? Anything that did not make sense or contradicts what you have already read in the study units? By the way, those portions of my slides, I have the notes here. It just summarized everything I say verbally in my webinars. So the rules, things to keep an eye on would be in that section. If you want to copy these notes down on your notebook on the side of your lessons, for example, that would be helpful. So you don't have to go back and forth through the unit to look up a rule, for example. Let's do another 2 inequalities. We're not going to graph them. I think by now we're able to graph any inequality. It's very simple. X minus 31 greater than or equal to 17. The first thing I'm going to do, add 31, because 31 has a negative sign. So add and add. Evaluate, X will be there. That's a 0, greater than or equal 17 plus 30. 1 will give you 48, then this is your answer. Your answer is any number that is 48 or greater. That's it. Last inequality, it looks different because this variable is on the right-hand side. We're not going to panic. We're going to apply the same rule, and then we'll see how would we write the final answer. Now, y is the variable, and we have a minus 5. Reverse, add 5, and add 5. 42 plus 5 will give you 47, less than. The y and the 5s will just cancel out. So now this answer is correct. If I want to read this answer, I would say 47 is less than y. But usually we write the variable on the left-hand side. So if I want to rewrite the solution, I'll do it as follows. Y greater than 47. Did I change the meaning of this inequality or that solution? I did not. Now this sign opened up towards the y, the sign still opening up towards the y. And the 47 is behind the sign, and it was behind the sign in the beginning. I did not change anything. It's just the way we rewrite, or we are used to rewrite our solutions as far as equations and inequalities. So that would be your final answer. Any questions? Anything that's not clear? If you have any questions, you can type them in the questions box. Also, at the end of this webinar, I have included a 1-question survey if you have the time, and I would appreciate it if you just answered that question. That would be a feedback for me to improve if I needed to redo things in my webinar. Let's do a self-check. So, solve the inequality -5 plus r greater than 16. What should we do? I'm going to leave that for about 30 seconds and then switch my screen to where you are able to select your answers. Okay, I'm going to display that same question on here. Okay, let me share my answer. And the answer is B. And I'm glad that some of you have chosen D. I have this answer in purpose because sometimes when we are working on inequalities, we forget that we do not deal with equal sign anymore. This is an inequality. So the number 21 that appears on the other side of the equation may deceive you, and you just, pick the wrong answer with the equal sign. This is not an equation, it's an inequality. So pay attention if you have that option and you're working on inequality, just avoid that answer. So the right answer is R, greater than 21. Okay, let's solve more inequalities. And this time we are going to solve inequalities using multiplications or divisions. Now, how do I decide what to do? Remember, we reverse whatever is being done to our variable. This variable x is multiplied times 3. Reverse that, undo the multiplication, then divide. Divide over 3 and do the same thing on the other side. 3 over 3 is a 1x. We just write it as an x in algebra. And then less than will stay. Negative 114 divided by 3 will give you negative 38. A negative over a positive will give you a negative answer. That's it. Now let's look at the second question. I'm going to put a star on that question. This question is a good question that may appear in your exam. For the fact that whenever we deal with inequalities and we have to divide or multiply the inequality times a negative value, this sign has to switch. It was a greater than, it will become a less than. Let's do that together. So if I'm looking at this inequality, I'm going to follow the same steps. The c, which is the variable, multiplied times a number, negative 9, then reverse, divide over negative 9, and divide over negative 9. I am dividing over a negative value. The first thing I'm going to do in my solution is to flip the sign and then evaluate the right and the left hand sides. Negative 9 over itself is a 1. 1c is a c. And then 108 divided by a negative 9 will give you a negative answer. It's going to be a negative 12. That's it. Now, so this is the most important thing. This is the only difference between solving equations and inequalities. Dividing or multiplying times a negative value will switch the inequality sign. Let's do number 3. G over 44 is less than or equal to negative 3. Now, one of the things that confuse students is that when they see a negative value on the right-hand side, they just switch the sign, which is not correct. We only switch signs if we have to divide or multiply times a negative value. So, in this case, I'm just going to multiply times a 44 and times a 44. Of course, 44 times g over 44, that's a 1. So g over 1 is a g. Less than or equal to, multiply. Negative 3 times 44 will give you negative 132. We did not switch the sign. Any questions? Anything that was not clear? Okay, Gabrielle, go ahead with your question. Okay, for the division number 3. I'm just waiting for Gabriel to send his question. And the whole purpose of having a live webinar with a live instructor is to ask questions and get the answer instantly if I'm able to answer your questions. How do you divide a negative integer? Now, when we divide a negative integer, we just treat it as a positive integer. The only difference is the sign of the answer. Let me give you an example using only integers, no variables. For example, 12 over negative 6 versus 12 over 6. Now, the only difference is that the denominator or the divisor is a negative here, but it's a positive here. How do we divide? I'm just going to ignore the sign. I'm going to think about it as 12 over 6, and 12 over 6 is a 2. But we have a sign here, a positive over a negative. That's a rule. A positive over a negative should give you a negative answer. So your answer is not only a 2, it's a negative 2. 12 over 6 is a 2 because positive over a positive will give you a positive answer. Also, I need to mention that if you're dividing negative 12 over negative 6, it should give you a positive answer. Negative over a negative will give you a positive answer, which is going to be 2 as well. Did I answer your question, Gabrielle? Okay, let's move on to, hopefully I did. Okay, you can review these things. If you go online to Khan Academy, they start from the very basic math, like really basic math when you add signed integers or divide or multiply signed integers. They have great videos there. I'm going to share that site with you at the end of the webinar if you want to refresh on the basic skills in math. Thank you for your question. So let's proceed with other questions. A divided by negative 12 is less than 6. Now I know I have a denominator. This denominator is a negative. I need to reverse division by multiplying times negative 12. So in my mind right now, I'm going to switch the sign. That's the first thing I'm going to do before I multiply anything. So I'm going to do that right in the beginning so I do not forget that later. So I switch the sign and then multiply. That would be an A. And then 6 times negative 12 will give you negative 72. That's it. This is your answer. Last one, negative C is greater than 28. Now, this is similar to what we have been doing so far. I just wanted to bring that question because a negative C is a weird, expression. It's usually confusing when we will have like an integer in front of the C, before the C or under the C. This is really negative 1C greater than 28. We know what to do. Divide over a negative 1, divide over a negative 1, switch the sign right away, and that will become a C, and then negative 28. That's it. Questions? Now, just wanted to share something with you just for the reasoning and, for our own knowledge. Why do we switch the sign when we multiply or divide over a negative value? I want to give you an example just for yourself, just to know why do we do that instead of just doing it without understanding that. Give you an example like negative 10 is of course less than 1. It's a negative and that's a positive, so the negative 10 is of course less than 1. Let's multiply both sides times a negative 2. So times negative 2 and times negative 2. Let's see which was going to happen with both sides. Negative 2 times negative 10 will give you a positive answer, 20. And then a 1 times a negative 2 will give you a negative answer, negative 2. Is it correct to keep the sign as less than? This is not a true statement. I need to switch the sign to a greater than sign because the signs have changed for both numbers when I multiply times the negative 2. So the right sign to use is the greater than. We flipped the sign. And this is why we use that rule whenever we divide or multiply times a negative answer, a negative integer, Okay, let's do one self-check question. Negative 7s is less than or equal to negative 91. What is the answer or the set of solutions for s? Okay, I'm going to switch my screen to give you the option to choose your answers. Okay, let me share my answer with you here. So the right set of solutions for S would be D. D is the right solution. Remember when we divide over a negative and a negative, two things will happen in that question. One, the sign will switch. Two, S will equal to positive 13. A negative over a negative is a positive answer. So D is the right answer. Okay, let's look at more complicated inequalities. Now, this inequality number 1, we see that the x is multiplied times a negative value and also 5 is subtracted from that product. What should we do? How can we proceed with solving that inequality? What should we do first? Multiply, divide, add? The same thing with equations. We always said to undo additions or subtractions first, and then we need to undo multiplication or divisions last. So it means for that question, I need to get rid of the minus 5 by adding 5 to both sides first. This is the first step. Negative 3x, that's a 0, less than or equal. Add 13 plus 5 is 18. I'm not done yet. I have to divide over 3. Negative 3. Divide over negative 3 and divide over negative 3. Right away, I'm going to switch my sign so I don't forget to do that. Negative over a negative is a positive, so that's an x. And then 18 over negative 3 will give you negative 6, and that would be your solution here. Let's do number 2. 8y plus 7 is greater than 3y minus 23. The special thing about this problem is that we have addition and multiplication and everything, but also our variable y appears both sides of the inequalities. What should we do? The same thing that we used to do with equations. Bring the variables together on the left-hand side, brings the numbers all together to the right-hand side. I'm going to do that by subtracting 7 from both sides. 8y will go down, that's a 0, greater than 3y, and then minus 30. Okay, still have a y here and a y there. I need to bring this y to the left-hand side. This is added, that's a positive sign, so subtract and subtract. So 8 minus 3 will give you 5y, greater than, that's a 0, negative 30. I'm not done yet. I have 5 times my variable reverse, over 5 and over 5. Are we going to switch the sign in this step? Are we going to switch the sign in this step? No, we did not divide or multiply over a negative value. There is a negative value on the right-hand side of the inequality. That does not mean that we switch the sign. So the answer would be y greater than negative 6. That's it. Any question? Anything that I should go over one more time? Okay, let's proceed to the next question. Negative 6k plus 14 is less than or equal to k. The same thing, I have a bunch of operations and also I have my variable appearing on both sides. I'm gonna get rid of the 14. So subtract 14 and subtract 14. So we're going to have so far negative 6k, that's a 0, less than or equal to k minus 14. Now I need to bring my k over to the left-hand side, subtract k, and subtract k. And that negative k is actually negative 1k. So negative 6 minus negative 1, I'm sorry, negative 6 minus 1. Negative 6 minus 1, negative 6 minus 1 will give you a negative 7k less than or equal to, that's a 0, minus 14 or negative 14. I'm not done yet. I have a negative 7 times my variable. Divide over negative 7 and divide over negative 7. That makes me switch the sign, and that would be a k. Negative over a negative is going to give me a positive answer, which is 2. That's it. Any questions? Anything that was not clear or was not consistent with the rules that we have been using so far? Okay, let's move on to a self-check question. If you have just joined us to the webinar, if you have a question, you can type in your question on the questions box. The raise your hand feature does not work. So now this question is a little bit different of a question. Which graph is the set of solutions for the inequality? And it gave us a complicated inequality with some multiplications and addition, the variable appearing on both sides. Now we have been solving the inequalities, and that's it. So now we are asked to go one step further, and after we solve our inequalities, we need to graph the solutions and pick the right graph. So since the screen where you choose your answer from it's not going to display the graphs, I'm going to leave that a little bit longer, and then at the end I'm going to switch to my screen so you can select your answer. So go ahead and try this inequality, please. I'm still here. Or webinar didn't disconnect or anything. I just wanted to give you some quiet time to work on this inequality. Okay, let's switch to the screen so you're able to share your answers. Here you go. Which graph would be the right graph for this inequality? Okay, I'm gonna share my answer with you here, and we're gonna be back on the screen where you see the graphs, which is good. Now the answer would be, after you do the subtractions and divide and switch, if you want to switch, but in this question we will not switch. So the answer would be, it's gonna be, let's solve the inequalities then. Just want to make sure that I have the right answer before I confuse you. Negative 23r plus 10 is less than or equal to 5r minus 46. So let's now get rid of the numbers and put them on the other side. I'm going to subtract 10 and subtract 10. So I have so far negative 23r, that's gone, less than or equal to 5r, and then I have negative 56. Okay, I need to bring the 5r over to the other side. So subtract and subtract, that would be 5r here. Negative 23 minus 5, you will add. So you're going to have a negative answer that's going to be a 28r less than or equal to. That's gone. That's a negative 56. I have to divide over a negative number. Yes, we are dividing over a negative number. So that would make me switch the sign. That's gone. And 56 over 28 will give you 2, and it's going to be a positive 2. So it's going to be closed circle, which is all of them. The negative 2's are wrong. That's wrong. So I'm going to eliminate the answers. The one I'm going to pick is the graph with the r greater than or equal to 2. So this is the answer, D. D is the answer. Let me know if you see anything wrong with my workout or anything that you do not make sense of as far as the final answer. Okay, I think this is the right answer. I had it originally a different answer, but I decided to work out the problem on spot with you just to make sure I have the right answer. I'm glad I did. The right answer is D. Okay, let's look at the word problems. Within your exam, your unit, you will see that they incorporate some um, real life problems that you are asked to use inequalities to solve those problems. The first thing that came to my mind is to go over the keywords that would give you a hint on the inequality sign that you need to use to represent that problem in terms of an inequality. So we see other words like maximum, at most, minimum, more than, fewer than, which keyword corresponds to which sign. So the first bunch of keywords, maximum, at most, no more than, it means that you need to use the less than or equal sign. To understand why, imagine that you have a bottle of anything, a bottle of water. You have a maximum mark, a max fill mark. So you are asked to fill that bottle no more than or no more beyond that mark. It means that you're able to fill the bottle to this line or below. So it means less than or equal. Less than or equal. That's how you would interpret the keywords and decide on which sign you will use. Minimum or at least or no less than, it means that the lowest thing you are gonna decide on, or the lowest value would be here, but everything else would be okay. So that's why we're gonna use greater than or equal. More than and exceeds, straightforward, it's a greater than sign. Less than or fewer than, it's straightforward, again, it's a less than sign. Any questions before we go to an actual word problem? Okay, let's go to a problem. I have made up those problems, so if they sound funny or, this is just only an example just to demonstrate how to use inequalities with a word problem. So let's read the question together. With any word problems, our goal always is to extract information and use them correctly in order to set up our equation or inequality and then solve from there and find our answer. You've been invited to a birthday party and you decided to attend. You are limited to a $310 budget. The haircut costs $12.35. You've already bought a present for $45.14. What should be the maximum cost of your outfit? So it means your outfit can cost the maximum cost of that you cannot go beyond would be what? So let's set up the inequality as follows and let me know if it makes sense. So it means that if you add up the cost of the haircut plus the cost of the present plus whatever the cost is for the outfit, it should not exceed 310. It may equal 310. That's okay. That would be we are on budget, but if it's under, that is good too, because you always want to keep yourself under the budget. So I'm going to represent that by writing 12.35, the haircut, plus the gift, the cost of the gift, plus R, whatever the outfit would cost. It should be less than or equal to 310. Does it make sense? So if you add up all of these expenses, you should not exceed your budget. This is your goal. And from there, we can just solve the inequality as we have been during this webinar. So I see like terms, just numbers, add them. You can use your calculator if you want. So add 12.35 plus 45.14, and it's 57.49, plus R is less than or equal to 310. Now I need my R by itself, subtract the decimal value here, do the same thing on the other side. Okay, that will go, it's a 0. R is less than or equal, use your calculator if you want, 310 minus 57.49 will give you the maximum cost of your outfit, which is $252.51. The outfit should not exceed this amount. If it did, you would go over budget. But if you went below that number, then you are below budget. Any question? Anything that you want to ask or are not clear about in this word problem? Let's look at another question. You started a new project to change the lining of your kitchen cabinets and drawers. One roll of liner covers 1,440 square inches. The total area that you will be covering with liners is approximately 4,300 square inches. At least, how many rolls of liners you should buy to complete your project? Well, let's think about it this way. One roll will cover 1,440 squared inches. How many of this space, how many of that area we need? So how many rolls? So 1,440 times R, the number of the rolls, should be greater than or equal to the area that you have calculated and measured in your cabinets and drawer. It should cover, or you may have leftovers. It's okay. So greater than or equal to the actual area that you are trying to cover. Does it make sense? Okay, let's solve the inequalities as we have been doing so far. So I have an R times a value, divide and divide. So that's a 1R. We're not going to change the sign. It's the same, greater than or equal to 2.98, or approximately, you cannot go to the store and tell them, give me 2.98 rolls. You will end up buying 3 rolls. So the number of the rolls that you have to buy at least should be 3 rolls. If you go overboard, it's okay. You make you make yourself safe if you have cut through the liners in a way that just ruins the whole thing. So you have extra, but the least number of rolls is 3. Any question? Anything that was not clear in everything that we went over so far? Okay, that concludes the math part of my webinar. So far, we have looked at simplifying and solving and graphing Equations, whether they are simple equations that you have to do one step or a multi-step inequalities. I'm sorry, did I say equations? In inequalities. We learned how to graph inequalities using a number line. Next unit, we're going to go over how to graph an inequality on the coordinate plane. Also, we just looked at a couple of examples on how to use inequalities to solve real life problems. Resources. How would you get ready for the exam? Of course, you're not going to take the exam unless you read the unit, watch the recorded webinar, work out the practice questions, self-checks, or discover more questions, however they call it in your unit. Make sure that you check your answers for those questions to the answer key provided to you. Now, if you watch me or anyone in YouTube or Khan Academy working the math problems, it's going to be a tiny chance that you will get to learn how to do it yourself. The only way to do that is to pick up your pen, prepare your notebook, write the question, do the workout yourself. Find the areas that you sometimes mess up with. Is it signs? Is it division? Is it switching the sign? And so on. This is how you learn how to do the problems. When you get your answer, check that with the answer key. If most of your answers are correct, you are ready for the exam. If not, do not proceed to the exam. Use any resource that is available for that course. One outside resource that I recommend is khanacademy.org. This site is so reliable, organized, very brief, and to the point. Their videos are so short, and most of them, I have looked at them, and they are correct, and you are able to rely on them. When you go to khanacademy.org, on the top left corner, click on Subjects, select Algebra 1, and then it will give you a long list of topics. The topic that corresponds to this lesson is one variable linear inequality. This is the lesson that you want to watch the videos for. Sometimes they have quizzes, sometimes they have practice questions. You do not have to do all of the huge list that they have. You can just look at a couple of videos. If you feel you're confident enough in the topic, then you have to go further and watch all of them. Also, you are able to seek help through calling the school 9 to 6 Eastern Time. Also, you are able now to schedule an appointment one-to-one with a teacher assistant or an instructor. This link, unfortunately, is not going to be clickable from your screen, but you are able to type the link that will take you to the main page where you can schedule for any subject. You want to select math. You want to select which subject in math that you need help with. Once you set up your time and date for the appointment, we call you back on that date and time and discuss that topic that you need help with. Also, now a new service that we have launched is SMS messages. You can text message 39033, and if you need help with your lessons, not the payment, then you want to text the word learn, and that will get one of the instructors to look at your questions. And I cannot claim it's going to be an instant response from the instructor, but we will get to you very shortly on your question. So a good example of using SMS would be a brief question like, do I have to retake the final lesson in Algebra 1? Did I pass Algebra 1? For example, just, short questions. Or maybe, can I have an appointment with the math instructor? Things like that. And here is how would you email your instructor. You can go from your portal, and you either have this kind of the account or this kind of the account. Choose whatever platform that you're on, and follow the steps for the one that applies to you. And that will bring you to the screen. And both of them will be those screens where you're asked to submit a question to the support team. Write your subject. If you have a math question, make it math, for example, or algebra. Anything that lets us know it's a math question. Write your question here, select instructional support, and then maybe just select general support and then hit continue. And that's it. That will send an email to your instructor. And this is how you can use the help provided for this course to, prepare for your exam, to have, discussion before you have an exam. Just make sure that you are on the right track. Any question? Okay, well, that concludes my webinar. I want to thank you all for your attendance and your attention. Thanks for your participation as well in the questions, the self-check questions. Also, as I've announced before, I began my webinar. There is a one question survey. It will ask you to rate this webinar from 1 to 5, 1 being not helpful at all, and 5 being very helpful. If you think it's helpful to a certain point, you can select any number lower than 5 but more than 1. But I would appreciate your feedback. That would make me improve my webinars and look into the areas I can do more and make it more useful and more helpful. If you don't have any question for me regarding the course or the lesson, I'm just going to go ahead and end the webinar. The recording for the webinar usually goes second day after the day of the webinar. So expect that in your inbox, and I wish you all the best in the exam. I'm going to wait for 30 seconds. If you have questions, you're able to type it and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, I wish you all the best in the exam. Good luck.